One of the things that absolutely defines us at Eventide is how we understand the purpose of investing. We, along with so many of our investors, think deeply about what's at stake in investing, that as investors, we are owners of a company and we are partnering with that company in whatever the company is part of, and that can be for tremendous good, and it could also be for harm. So as we consider this idea that investing is ownership, it immediately prompts us to what we consider to be the first and most basic question of investing, and that is, what kind of companies do we want to own? So in order to answer that question, we have to first understand what business is really for, and that's what this talk is about. So I want to open with this question. Why do companies have mission statements? Have you ever thought about it? Typically what happens is that the executives of a company will go away together on a retreat. They'll spend several days together crafting the perfect mission statement. They'll come back and frame it. They'll give that mission statement to all of their employees to take and embody this mission and ultimately to move it forward. So why do we do this? Alistair McIntyre is a philosopher who wrote a book called After Virtue, which is considered to be one of the most important works of philosophy from the 20th century. In his book, he says this: "I can only answer the question, what am I to do, if I can answer the prior question of what story or stories do I find myself a part?" What he's saying is that story really determines all of the actions that we take. Story is at the bottom of how we live. It forms our identity, which gives rise to our convictions, which informs our values and drives the actions that we take. And of course, because story is driving our actions, it also drives our outcomes. So the reason that companies spend so much time carefully crafting these mission statements is because they want to have one big story and the right story driving all of their actions as a company. Story provides meaning and purpose for our work, and even in a broader sense for our lives. In fact, all of our lives are organized around these stories that we tell about ourselves, about why we're here, about what and whom we care about, and why we do the things that we do. And the same is true for a business. The story that a business tells about itself takes its first shape in a mission statement. So let's start with Sony. Sony exists to establish a place of work where engineers can feel the joy of technological innovation, be aware of their mission to society, and work to their heart's content. Hewlett-Packard exists to make a contribution to society by designing, developing, and manufacturing the finest electronic equipment for the advancement of science and the welfare of humanity. Facebook exists to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. Do you hear how lofty these mission statements are? They speak of things like advancing humankind, the welfare of humanity, a mission to society, of human flourishing. These are big, big stories. These are stories of hope. And when story aims too low, on the other hand, it is deeply dissatisfying to us. When we talk about what we do, rather than its purpose or the bigger story of why it is that we do it, it bothers us really to the bottom of our souls. We hate it when stories aim too low. So humanity has always believed that life and work is about something. The stories that we tell about life will give rise to very different outcomes depending on which story we tell. So I want to share with you a couple of different stories that humanity has told about work and about business, and I want to share with you the outcomes that come from each of those. So we'll start with the Western story about human life. It's the story of Pandora's box. In this story from the Greeks, a god named Prometheus stole fire from Mount Olympus, from the other gods, and gave it to man for the development of civilization and culture. This made the gods very angry, and so they decided to put all these curses in a box and gave it to Pandora, who was said to be the first woman. As Pandora opened the box, all of these curses of the world came out from it: disease, death, and it might surprise you, but also work. So in the Greek telling, work was actually a curse given by the gods. So the outcome of a story where work is a curse means that the identity of a worker is one who is experiencing a curse of the gods. Work is fundamentally a curse, so it's something to be disdained. As a result, the higher life of the mind and art and philosophy and politics came to be valued, and the elites and higher classes would escape work if they could, relegating manual work to slaves. The outcome of all of this is that work was thought of and became meaningless toil, something to be endured and not to be embraced. I want to share with you also the Eastern story, which is the story of a garden. In this story, God himself is a worker, and he creates the world and everything that's in it. In this telling, God places man in a garden that is richly resourced with everything that man would need. The one exception to that is that it was incomplete, only in the sense that it needed developing in order to bring out its creative capacity. In this story, God gives work to humans as a gift and not as a curse, but instead with almost a commissioning service on how to use work well. So how did this play out in Hebrew culture and then in any of the places where this belief spread? It's almost the exact opposite of the Western story. So in this story, the identity of a human is that the human has a unique role as a co-worker of God. Humankind is created with inherent worth and dignity. So work was fundamentally good. All work could be noble, whether it was manual or mental, and it was a necessary part of providing for the material needs of the world. In terms of values, work was something to be embraced. Humans had inherent dignity and therefore a value of each other that aligned with that. So work was an opportunity to discover and create value from the raw materials of the earth and to use one's own gifting as a way to serve others. The outcome of this story is ultimately that work was a blessing, both to the worker and to the rest of the world. You can see what a contrast there is between these two stories, one of work as a curse and one of work as a gift. In this story of gift, the garden story was actually broadly accepted and was the dominant narrative until the time of Adam Smith. So I want to ask you now, what is the dominant story that we tell about business today? We all know what to say. It's shareholder value maximization. So you'll probably be familiar with this quote. There is one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits, so long as it stays within the rules of the game, which is to say, engages in open and free competition without deception or fraud. So in this quote, Milton Friedman is communicating that there is no social story to business, that the business of business is business. It's about making money. So this excludes any conversation about the impact that a business can have for good or for harm of the stakeholders that they interact with. These stakeholders are outside of business, and to the extent that we try to bring them into the story about business, we're only going to mess things up and distract from the real goals of business. So what are the outcomes that we see under this banner of shareholder value maximization? Well, we do see wonder in business. We still see advancement in human agriculture. We see more and more availability of clean water, renewable energy, the ability to fly through the sky. We see innovations in technology and medical care that preserve and even save human lives. But we also see tragedy in business. If any business that makes a profit is a good business, then it really doesn't matter what they do or how they do it. Under the banner of profit as the purpose of business, some businesses have felt totally okay with developing products and services that prey on human weakness or exploit natural resources and ultimately cause much harm. There is huge disillusionment with business today and a resulting loss of faith and trust in corporations altogether. I think what people really believe about business is something more like this statement: business is not as it was intended. A vast devastation has struck it. Nevertheless, it is great in its ruins. Like a glorious cathedral after a bombing, business still displays the grandeur for which it was designed. So if you picture a bombed out cathedral as you think about business, we can still see the beauty of business while there is so much that needs restoration. We need this return to a higher purpose for business. Jeff Van Duzer, who is the provost of Seattle Pacific University and formerly the dean of their business school, fully rejects this idea that business is about profit only. He says that business has always existed to provide goods and services, to enable a community to flourish, and to provide people with opportunities for meaningful work. Charles Handy addresses this even more directly, saying, to turn shareholders' needs into a purpose is to be guilty of a logical confusion, to mistake a necessary condition for a sufficient one. We need to eat to live. Food is a necessary condition of life. But if we lived mainly to eat, making food a sole or sufficient purpose of life, we would become gross. The purpose of business, in other words, is not to make a profit, full stop. It is to make a profit so that the business can do something more or better. At Eventide, we believe the true story of business is to serve the common good. We believe that biggest story for business, the Eastern story, and that motivates us day in and day out. This is our mission statement. Eventide exists to honor God and serve its clients by investing in companies that create compelling value for the global common good. We all long for business to be about something great. We believe the longing itself is an indication of the reality that it actually is about something great. We invite you to get caught up in this big story of business and to invest in companies that are serving the common good.